The Edge is Ford's best-selling SUV in the USA, success it hopes to emulate here in Europe. The idea is to add a top tier to the Blue Oval's crossover and SUV lineup that'll keep customers within the Ford family who might otherwise desert to other brands. These people will like the fact that the Edge is good-looking, well-equipped and offered for the kind of money that normally would only buy you a relatively compact car of this kind. Will all that be enough to enable Ford to steal sales from the premium brands? It'll be interesting to see.
Ford gives you more used to be the Blue Oval brand's marketing slogan, and perhaps it still does. For proof, have a look at this large, sophisticated and very well equipped SUV, the Edge. The Edge was one of those models that we never used to get in our market. Well, that's all changed since the adoption of the company's supposedly enlightened One Ford policy that tries to create a global product range rather than one in which cars are developed for specific countries. That's been very nice for other nations who get to enjoy our sharp handling Focuses and Fiestas. Whether we've done quite so well out of the deal may be more debatable, as Ford's model lineup has here in recent years been swelled by the Brazilian-built KA+, the Indian-made EcoSport crossover, the US market Mustang sports car, and this Canadian-assembled Edge SUV. This, of course, is not the first time that Ford has tried to offer key models in a greater number of key markets. I'll take the last large luxury SUV the company attempted to sell here, the Explorer. Launched in 1997, this US market 4x4 was everything European buyers didn't want. Weighty, ponderous and petrol-powered. As a result, buyers almost universally ignored the thing, and it took nearly 2 decades before Ford felt brave enough to return to the full-size SUV sector with this Edge model, launched here in the summer of 2016. By this time, the company absolutely needed a larger SUV in its lineup to satisfy buyers in this segment wanting something a little larger than the Blue Oval brand's existing small EcoSport and medium-sized Cougar models. Fortunately, much had been learnt about how to create it. So, forget the truck-like underpinnings you might expect from a large SUV that sells primarily in the US. This car instead shares its CD4 platform and much of its interior with the well-regarded Mondeo, as well as Ford's S-Max and Galaxy MPVs. That people-carrying provenance is one reason why the Edge is so spacious inside, though curiously, for the European market, Ford hasn't used that extra room to build in the third seating row that many family SUV buyers now seem to want. Still, the lack of that feature doesn't seem to have held back some of the much more compact, mainstream branded models in this segment that this Ford has been priced against. Contenders like plush 4x4 versions of Volkswagen's Tiguan and Honda CR-V. And that, for the cost of something like this, an Edge can give you the kind of space inside that you'd expect from a much larger and pricier luxury SUV like a Volkswagen Touareg or a BMW X5 has to be a strong selling point. But does this car have others? Let's find out. Ford has earned an enviable reputation over the past 2 decades for the way its cars ride and handle. But in recent times, there's been a slight switch of emphasis that more greatly prioritises comfort. Now, you could argue about whether that's appropriate on large Blue Oval brand models like the Mondeo or the S-Max that originally built their reputations on the back of a dynamic standard of drive. What's not up for debate, though, is that a comfort-orientated approach is entirely in keeping with the remit of a large SUV like this Edge. No one's going to be buying this car and then wondering why it doesn't respond particularly well to being thrown around the lanes. The 2 turbo diesel engines on offer do a decent job of propelling the car along, and they're very much on par with rivals' pace. Both are 2-litre TDCI units and only come mated to Ford's intelligent all-wheel drive system, two-wheel drive being an option that the company doesn't think is really relevant on an SUV of this size. Buyers choose between two mechanical setups, a 180 PS single turbo variant you have to have with a 6-speed manual gearbox, or the package we're trying here, which is a 210 PS twin turbo derivative only offered with 6-speed power shift automatic transmission. Even the base engine is reasonably eager once you get it going, thanks to 400 Nm of torque. And make the most of this motor and you'll hit 62 miles an hour from rest in 9.9 seconds, en route to a top speed that you'll find to be 124 miles an hour, should you end up flat out on an autobahn. We reckon the better choice, though, is the twin-turbo 210 PS TDCI unit we're trying here. For one thing, the auto gearbox it comes with suits this car much better. You really don't want to be having to grapple with a manual change in a large SUV unless you absolutely have to, especially when, as in this case, there's no particular efficiency advantage in doing so. It's just a pity that the PowerShift auto transmission's flexibility is limited by its provision of just 6 ratios. That's in an era where rivals have 8 speeds or even 9. The 210 PS engine's extra turbo gives you 50 Nm more pulling power, which also makes a noticeable difference, especially if you snick the auto selector down into its sportier S setting. Unfortunately, though, the extra torque isn't enough to improve this car's 2.2-ton brake towing limit. That's a rather disappointingly low figure when you consider that US market edge models can apparently log along up to 3.5 tons. As for tarmac driving dynamics, well, having heard the comments we made at the beginning, you won't be surprised to learn that this is a very different kind of SUV from Ford's Kuga, the next model down in the company's SUV lineup. You shouldn't gather from that, though, that this is anything like the lurching, ponderous big 4x4s that litter Ford's back model catalogue. Body lean through the bends is actually very well controlled, there's plenty of grip, and mid-corner bumps do very little to shake this Edge's composure, even when you're powering on. We can't really see the point, though, of paying more to get the Sport model with its stiffer sport suspension and adaptive steering that's supposed to make this Ford feel more stable when you're cornering at higher speeds. This really isn't that kind of car. It's better to focus on the things this SUV is really good at. The supple ride quality does a good job of smothering bigger bumps, and refinement is really excellent thanks to the clever active noise cancellation system that we first saw on Ford's Mondeo Vignale. Here, 3 microphones inside the cabin detect engine noise levels and then transmit a nullifying counter frequency through the stereo speakers. Avoid entry-level trim and you also get acoustic glazing, and the combination of these 2 features make this Edge impressively quiet, especially at higher speeds. The benefits of this aren't felt as keenly around town, and that's an environment where you also really notice the extra size and prodigious width, 2.2 metres, of this car. It's certainly not as easy to park or thread through heavy traffic as a comparably priced but smaller mid-sized RAV4 or Tiguan class SUV would be. Tight spots you simply cruise through in a Kuga need careful attention in an Edge. And off the beaten track, well, as you might expect, the Edge is no Land Rover Discovery, but by the more modest mud-plugging standards of other SUVs in the class, it acquits itself very well. A reasonable level of ground clearance, just over 200mm, certainly helps, as does the wheel angle flexibility of the all-independent suspension setup. The damping system is, we should mention, a purely passive package. There's no selective adaptive option of the kind you find in German rivals. More significant on an SUV, though, is the lack of a height-adjustable air suspension option or self-levelling rear suspension to make towing easier. Still, plenty of other 4x4s at this price point lack those features too. This big Ford's intelligent all-wheel drive system is a permanent setup and, like nearly all its rivals, uses torque-on-demand technology to send power to whichever wheel has the most traction. The software gauges that via 25 sensors and monitors how much grip the car has every 16 milliseconds, so the driver can remain blissfully unaware as to which axle or which individual wheel is doing most of the work, unless he or she chooses to monitor the process from a display that's provided on the premium instrument cluster you get on plusher models. As a result of all this, muddy car parks and field tracks are well within the Edge's remit. The Serengeti, however, you might have to leave to Ranulph Fiennes. previous large Ford 4x4s have looked very much what they were, SUVs primarily designed for American and Far Eastern markets. This Edge model, though, is different. It's large and imposing, but with far more of the kind of European feel that it'll need to take on established rivals this side of the Atlantic. That's further helped by underpinnings very much developed for our side of the pond. Under the skin, the Edge sits on the same CD4 platform that Ford uses for the other large models in its passenger car range, the Mondeo and the S-Max and Galaxy MPVs. Up front, there's a bold nose section dominated by this large chrome-trimmed trapezoidal grille, the final finish of which varies depending on the trim level you decided on. High-set headlamps flank this opening. These are lights that can be upgraded, as here, to LED adaptive glare-free status if you're prepared to pay a little more. Lower down, chrome-trimmed fog lamp recesses sit on the outer edges of a chunky bumper that incorporates a lower skid plate style section that suits this model's SUV status. From the side, you get more of a perspective of the sheer size of this Ford. And the car's a substantial 2.2 metres wide and is fully 4.8 metres long, making it even slightly larger than a large segment SUV like Volkswagen's Touareg. It's certainly much bigger than comparably priced mid-segment models like Honda CR-V, for example. That's around 4.6 metres long. The styling does its best to disguise the bulk with sharp-edged creases that are smart if a little generic. A mid-level feature line flows through the door handles, while another lower down gives the flanks some shape. And depending on the model chosen, handsome 19 or 20-inch alloys fill these chunky wheel arches, and wraparound door panels cover the recessed sills to prevent your legs from picking up dirt as you climb in. The rear looks neat too, with Mondeo-style LED rear lamp clusters that curve around the corners of the car and are separated by this reflective strip that runs along the base of the rear screen. At the top of the steeply raked tailgate is a spoiler, while the handle on the lower section is easy to find in the dark. Further down, there's another skid plate style panel below the bumper, this separating twin exhaust pipes at either side. Time to take a look inside. Now, there's a well-chosen semi-high-rise hip point that means you don't have to clamber up into the driver's seat in the way that's necessary with some other large SUVs and previous truck-based big Ford 4x4s. Get comfortable and then look around, and there'll be plenty that'll be familiar if you're used to driving any of Ford's other larger cars. I mentioned earlier that the Edge sits on the same underpinnings as a Mondeo, an S-Max or a Galaxy, and that's something you could guess just by looking at the dashboard, because it is pretty much exactly the same as you find in one of those models. To some extent, that's no bad thing. The instrument panel and the centre console featuring a smoothly fashioned one-piece design highlighted by chrome accents that frame the central and peripheral air vents. Ahead of you, through the leather-trimmed three-spoke multifunction steering wheel, there's a classy, if rather cluttered, instrument cluster that in mid and upper range models gives you this sophisticated 10-inch TFT setup made up as various inset multifunction displays. The two outer ones are framed by conventional speedometer and rev counter gauges with trip computer information on the left and safety functionality depicted on the right. In the middle you get entertainment, navigation and phone options. Now, anything this setup can't tell you will probably be covered by the feature that on all models dominates the centre of the dash, the 8-inch Sync 3 colour touchscreen there to play its part in reducing button clutter and giving the cabin a cleaner, smarter feel. The Sync 3 package offers fast activation, large buttons, easy app integration, and perhaps most importantly, functionality that allows you to duplicate the operation of your smartphone onto the central fascia screen via either Apple CarPlay or the MirrorLink Android Auto system. Not so good is the way this touchscreen attracts fingerprints and reflections that you'll particularly notice if you've got this optional panoramic sunroof fitted. If you're not familiar with the Sync system, it doesn't take long to adjust to it, with the central dash monitor divided into 4 colour-coded sectors that allow you to activate audio, phone, climate control and, where fitted, sat-nav functions via touchscreen buttons. Heating and ventilation is also covered off by switchgear below the screen, which is just as well, since the display buttons can be a little bit fiddly to use. So instead of stabbing away at those, it's better to try and master the system's impressive voice-activated functionality that allows you to issue simple one-shot commands like play song to play a track from a CD, where am I to find out where you are, and even I'm hungry to bring up a list of local restaurants from the system's built-in Michelin guide. Directions can then be activated from the split-screen navigation display. And beyond media connectivity, well, even if you get your Edge trimmed out like this with leather upholstery, as most buyers are expected to, there isn't quite the plush depth of quality you'll find in a premium brand SUV. One writer described this cabin as having all the ambiance of a recently refurbished Hilton hotel. And while that is a little bit unkind, we kind of understand what he was getting at. Still, this is a very practical place to be. Depth, a particular feature of this storage box that sits between the front seats and the cup holders positioned just in front of it, space for which has been freed up by substituting a conventional handbrake for one of these fiddly little switches. Other useful stowage solutions include a fascia top storage box, a neat pull-out cubby down to the right of the steering wheel, and a lidded box at the bottom of the centre console that'll be ideal for your phone or iPod because it incorporates aux-in, USB and SD card points, as well as a 12-volt socket. Look behind this area and there's a further open storage space, plus you get a reasonably sized glove box and decently sized door pockets that can hold 1.5 litre drinks bottles. So, time to take a seat in the back. As at the front, the doors open wide to make access easy. And once you're inside, you'll find massively more space than is provided by mid-sized SUV models at this price point. No other 4x4 priced remotely closely to this one can comfortably sit 3 adults across the back seat. But that feat is easily managed by this Ford, aided by a notably low-set central transmission tunnel. There's plenty of room for heads too, although the ceiling height will be slightly compromised if you pay extra for the panoramic glass roof I mentioned earlier. There are also reclining seat backs for greater comfort on longer trips. You get decently sized pockets in the doors, and there's even rear seat heating if you specify the extra cost Luxe pack that most customers choose. To some extent, the reason why it's so spacious back here is that, surprisingly, Ford has opted not to add in a third fold-out seating row in the boot. This seems curious given the success currently being enjoyed in this segment by 7-seat models like Land Rover's Discovery Sport. And the lack of this feature, even as an option, seems particularly strange when you consider that the Edge was designed to include it. Models sold in China do indeed offer the option to seat 7. Ford retorts that the similarly priced SUVs like Toyota's RAV4, Honda's CR-V and Volkswagen's Tiguan sell very well without 7 seats, but those SUVs aren't big enough to take 3 seating rows. This one is. Where the 5-seat only approach should pay off is when it comes to boot space. So let's take a look at that. Now, avoid entry-level trim and you get this power-operated tailgate that can be activated merely by waving your foot beneath the bumper if you happen to be approaching the car laden down with bags. Once it's raised, there is indeed a quite enormous boot. Even if you fill the space only up to the window line, there's room for 602 litres of cargo. Pack it to the roof and you can fit in 800 litres of luggage. Beneath the boot floor, there's a bit of space and, refreshingly, a standard space-saver spare wheel. The divided rear seats are split 60-40, and when you use these release buttons just inside the tailgate, they tumble forwards with little effort. Unfortunately, though, the springs that help flip the seats forward work against you when you're trying to push the things back up. When the seats are retracted, they don't sit quite flat either. Still, they reveal a lengthy carriage area that's up to 1,847 litres in size, and that is about 200 litres more than you get in, say, a Tiguan or a RAV4. Edge pricing sits in the £30,000 to £40,000 bracket, and in buying one, mechanical options are pretty straightforward. All variants come with Ford's intelligent all-wheel drive system, and there's a 2-litre Duratorque TDCi diesel engine offered to buyers in a choice of power outputs. You either select the base 180 PS single turbo unit, available only with a 6-speed manual gearbox, or you go for the 210 PS twin turbo power plant that we've been trying here, and that's offered only with PowerShift automatic transmission. As for trim, well, the entry-level Z-Tech spec comes only with entry-level 180 PS power, but further up the range with titanium, sport and Vignale models, there's the option in each case of either the base engine with manual transmission, or for a £2,250 premium, the 210 PS unit with the auto gearbox. On to the value proposition those figures represent. Now, Ford's smaller Cougar SUV will outsell this Edge model by 7 to 1, but it's worth noting that a Cougar with the same 180 PS 2-litre diesel engine as an entry-level Edge would only cost you around £2,000 less. As for competitor SUVs, well, the Blue Oval brand is keen to point out that an Edge is sized closely to large luxury SUVs like Volkswagen's Touareg and BMW's X5, yet it costs around £15,000 less. It also costs between £3,000 and £5,000 less than much more compact premium badged SUVs like BMW's X3, Audi's Q5 and the Mercedes GLC. Plus, in the case of all the models we just mentioned, you'd have to spend significantly more to match this Ford's level of standard specification. We can't help thinking, though, that buyers switching to this Edge from a premium brand competitor will be in the minority. Most likely customers, we think, will be people who had been looking at spending around £30,000 to £35,000 on upper-spec four-wheel drive versions of mainstream branded compact SUVs like Honda CR-V, Volkswagen's Tiguan and Toyota's RAV4. But they now find that with this Ford, they can get more car for their money. If you're in this market, then you've probably also realised that Edge pricing is very comparable with the kind of cash you'd spend on 7-seat mid-sized SUVs like Land Rover's Discovery Sport, Hyundai's Santa Fe and Kia's Sorento. With those 4x4s, there's the bonus of that useful third seating row. But in comparison to this Ford, there's also less boot space and more compromised standards of second-row legroom. So ultimately, it'll all come down to what you want. If, having considered all of that, you decide that it is the Edge that you really want, then, as we suggested earlier, a major selling point will be the impressively complete standard equipment tally. Now, even the entry-level Z-Tech variant comes with 19-inch alloy wheels, roof rails, rear privacy glass, a quick clear heated windscreen, auto headlamps and wipers, LED rear tail lamps, a rear spoiler, power folding mirrors and a Thatcham Category 1 alarm. Now, another nice standard feature is the useful Ford My Key setup that recognises your favourite driving settings from an individually programmed ignition key. Inside, standard interior features include a Ford power starter button, a rear-view camera, a dual-zone electronic automatic temperature control system, and an active noise control setup that improves refinement by drowning out travelling noise with sound waves played through the stereo speakers. Perhaps the most important interior selling point, though, will be the Sync 3 infotainment system with its 8-inch colour touchscreen, voice control, Bluetooth phone connectivity and a 9-speaker DAB stereo system. Through Sync 3, you can duplicate the functionality of your smartphone onto the central facial display via Apple CarPlay or the MirrorLink Android Auto systems. So, quite a lot of kit comes as standard on the basic Z-Tech variant. Despite that, Ford expects half of all Edge buyers to go for the mid-range titanium trim level that we're trying here, partly because, as we mentioned earlier, it's only from this point in the range that you get the option of automatic transmission and that more powerful twin-turbo engine, and partly because titanium trim does include a number of luxury features that you'll probably really want. Things like satellite navigation, front and rear parking sensors, and a keyless entry and start system that includes a powered tailgate that you can raise with a wave of your foot. Other titanium niceties include a 10-inch TFT premium instrument cluster with virtual graphics, acoustic glazing that further helps with refinement, sports-style heated seats, smarter 5-spoke alloy wheels, and to make you feel special at night, an ambient lighting system and illuminated door scuff plates. Is there a case for going further up the range? Well, we're not sure that there is. Sports models with the larger 20-inch black alloy wheels get sport suspension and an adaptive steering system that varies its assistance through the bends. But neither of these dynamic features are crucial on a car of this kind. At the top of the range, the Vignale models really major on luxury, with bespoke exterior styling, exclusive interior quilted leather trim, cooled, powered and heated electric front seats with a memory function, and access to a dedicated Vignale customer services hotline. On to options available across the Edge lineup. Now, to misquote Henry Ford, you can have any colour you like as standard on this car, as long as it's white. Yeah, every other shade will cost you extra. As for wheels, well, on mainstream models, you may well want to upgrade the 19-inch rims to 20 inches, finished either in silver or black. Avoid entry-level Z-Tech trim, and there's also the opportunity to consider upgrading the headlamps with the LED adaptive headlights with glare-free technology package. We'd also want to look at the active park assist with parallel and perpendicular parking system that automatically steers you into tighter spaces and warns you of obstacles around the vehicle. And that's a real boon on an SUV as large as this one. Another manoeuvring aid is provided by the optional front wide view camera that widens your field of view at junctions. Now, many owners will want to consider the optional panorama roof that we have here with its sliding glass section and interior sunblind, although choosing this does mean that you have to do without roof rails. A popular upgrade for buyers of this mid-range titanium variant is the Sony DAB premium audio with navigation system. Now, go for this or get that sport model that includes it as standard, and your Ford dealer will offer you the chance to further spoil yourself by adding in an optional Lux pack. Now, with that, you get the panorama roof along with full leather upholstery, powered and climate-controlled front seats, heated rear seats and a memory function for the door mirrors. As for other options, well, you could add in a heated steering wheel, and you might also want to consider a couple of practical touches that we would probably want. There's a luggage compartment mat with a flip-over waterproof rubber finish that's ideal when you're carrying things like dirty wellies, and a load retention guard that helps to secure items in the cargo area. There are also a number of accessories you can order from your dealer that fit in with the Edge's aim to be a lifestyle SUV. A Thule roof box offers extra luggage storage, and there are also crossbars available that will help in mounting other items on top of the car. You might also consider the Thule ski and snowboard carrier, or if cycling's more your thing, roof bike carrier. You might prefer to fit bicycles to the back of this Ford with a rear bike carrier, or go for the detachable tow bar to pull a trailer up to 2,200 kilos. Other options include Climb Air wind deflectors that fit around the front window frames to reduce wind noise and turbulence when the door glass is open. And to help keep your Edge clean, mud flaps can be fitted, although for some reason you can't have those on sport variants. On to safety equipment. As you'd expect, the Edge comes as standard with twin front, side and curtain airbags, plus Isofix child seat mounts, a tyre pressure monitoring system, hill start assist to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions, and all the usual basic electronic assistance features. These include ESC stability control, of course, and anti-lock brakes with emergency brake assist and an electronic brake pre-fill feature that shortens the time between pressing that pedal and the anchors coming on to further reduce stopping distances. Also standard is a lane keeping aid that'll alert you if you drift out of your lane on the highway, and a collision avoidance system that scans the road ahead as you drive at speeds of up to 50 miles an hour for potential collision hazards. Now, if one's detected, you'll be warned. If you don't respond, or perhaps you aren't able to, the brakes will automatically be applied to decrease the severity of any resulting accident. Other standard electronic safety features include a driver alert system that warns you if your reactions suggest you're getting a little tired, and a traffic sign recognition feature that pictures speed signs as you pass them and displays them on the dash. There's also a cruise control with speed limiter and intelligent speed assistance system, so you can avoid accidentally going over the limit on any given road. Safety options include inflatable rear seat belts that have a built-in airbag to reduce injuries in a crash. I would also want to look at the blind spot information system with cross-traffic alert package that includes 3 further useful safety features. A blind spot information system that on the move stops you from dangerously pulling out to overtake when there's a car in your blind spot, and a cross-traffic alert feature that warns you of oncoming traffic if you're reversing out of a parking space. And also you get auto-dimming headlamps that automatically dip in the face of oncoming traffic at night. If there is a disadvantage in getting a large SUV for the price of a much smaller one, then you might expect to find it when attention switches to the issue of efficiency. So is that the case here? Well, let's see. There's no difference between the running cost figures produced by the 2 main Edge variants. So whether you go for the 180 PS manual gearbox model or the 210 PS auto transmission version, you're supposed to be able to return up to 48.7 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 149 grams per kilometre of CO2. Now take that down a few percentage points if you opt to get an Edge fitted with larger 20-inch wheels. So it all means that if you fill the relatively large 68-litre fuel tank to the brim, should be able to manage around 700 miles between fill-ups, provided you drive with a modicum of restraint. In view of the question we posed at the beginning, we should try and give you some perspective on these figures. Now, going into this test, we'd expected this relatively heavy 1.9-tonne all-wheel drive only Ford to be significantly less efficient to run than a much lighter but comparably priced mid-sized SUV like Volkswagen's Tiguan. Now, actually, if you compare an Edge to the Tiguan in that Volkswagen's most comparable 2-litre TDI 190 PS 4Motion DSG form, then you'll find that the fuel and CO2 figures of the 2 models are about the same, which is an impressive showing given that this Ford weighs around 250 kilograms more. A comparable Land Rover Discovery Sport does a bit better, but then that is a slightly smaller and slightly lighter car. All the usual modern efficiency aids are in play to help this Ford achieve this class competitive showing. So there's smart regenerative charging, which harvests energy that would otherwise be lost under braking. The reasonably sleek shape and carefully fashioned underbody aerodynamic shielding also play their part in reducing drag. And to combat harmful fumes, there's an active thermal management system that improves warm-up times so the engines reach peak efficiency faster. Plus, as you'd expect, there's the usual auto start-stop setup that cuts the engine when you don't need it, when you're stuck in traffic or waiting at the lights. That engine also features a lean nitrogen oxide exhaust trap after-treatment system for cleaner emissions. What else? Well, if you're thinking of this Edge as an alternative to a premium badged SUV, you might well be worried about residual values. More surprisingly, there's little to fear on this score, aided by the fact that this model will be a relatively rare sight on our roads, Ford planning to import only around 5,000 cars a year. Now, to put that in perspective, the brand sells around 35,000 examples of its smaller Cougar SUV every 12 months. As a result, the 180 PS model has a 40% predicted retained value figure after 3 years and 60,000 miles, with the 210 PS version only a hair's breadth behind on 39%. That's about the same as you get from something like a Mazda CX-5 and only a little behind the 44% showing you get from a Land Rover Discovery Sport. Now, all of this is important for ensuring that leasing costs for this Ford will be very class competitive. All Edge models come with an unremarkable 3-year, 60,000-mile Ford warranty with Ford assistance at the roadside for the first year. If you plan on keeping your car for longer or you're a high-mileage driver, then you can pay a small extra cost to extend that warranty to 4 years and 80,000 miles or 5 years and 100,000 miles. There's also the option of a Ford Protect Premium plan that over 2 or 3 years can cut the cost of scheduled garage visits. And on that subject, service intervals arrive every 20,000 miles or 2 years, depending on which comes soonest. As for insurance ratings, well, the Edge with the 180 PS 2-litre turbo diesel engine is ranked in Group 25, about the same as something like a Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV. For those who prefer more power, the 210 PS version of this Ford comes in at Group 29, which is the same as less powerful Land Rover Discovery Sport and Volvo XC60 rivals. What we've established then is that this is more than just another attempt by Ford to sell a big US-made 4x4 over here. Think of this Edge as an MPV like a Galaxy or an S-Max designed for the rough, and you'd probably be closer to the mark. But it's more than that too. On prolonged acquaintance, this car reveals itself as a very likeable, very capable SUV that's more than up to challenging the best in its class. Start to consider exactly what class that is, and you get to this Ford's strongest selling point, the fact that it gives you the space and most of the opulence of a large Volkswagen Touareg-sized luxury segment SUV for the price of a smaller Volkswagen Tiguan-shaped mid-sized one. It is a pity that Ford couldn't have completed the proposition with a third-row seating option, but even so, the right kind of buyer will find this package difficult to resist. Of course, there are other areas in which the Blue Oval brand could improve this car, aside from just adding some extra seats to it. Not everyone thinks that size matters, and those SUV buyers who don't especially value this Ford's supremely spacious rear cabin and enormous boot will probably be unforgiving of the fact that it's less wieldy and rewarding to drive than other segment competitors at this price point. Global sales figures, though, suggest that most potential buyers find the dynamics of this car as good as they need to be, backed up by the standard security of Ford's capable intelligent all-wheel drive system. This model's also very well equipped. It's smart to look at and it's media savvy. It is, in short, the first really credible large car that Ford has produced this century that wasn't an MPV. An SUV that has a bit of an edge to it. Try one. You'll see what we mean.